About a week's ride in a mostly southerly direction out of Hirikith City is the town of Springview, a picturesque farming town surrounded by forest, a frequent stopping place for trade caravans headed to and from the capital. Named after the natural spring that feeds into a rudimentary aqueduct system that provides the town with a clean and mineral-rich supply of fresh drinking water and irrigation for its fertile fields. Drawing all their water from the spring has allowed the town to avoid the age-old problem of being downstream from a larger population center. Theoretically, Springview is a nice place to visit, but to the socialites in Hirikith City, just another rural backwater. Citizens of towns like Springview are feeling the lack of attention and resources from the Crown as of late, far more than those in the city, and it only gets worse the more remote a town or village is. Things have been quiet in the area lately. It is becoming increasingly hazardous to travel on the roads, so merchants are not passing through as frequently as they once did. Local businesses are suffering with a lack of customer traffic, and farmers are finding it harder to send their goods to market. The town's coffers were fast approaching empty. The town was broke. Then it got worse. A series of unfortunate events befell the town. Their solution: attempt to cover most of it up and hold a grand tourney somehow. Messengers were sent out, and word quickly spread. People actually came to the town on the allotted date, in droves. Darren Dahl was born to a noble family. This should have entitled him to a life of relative luxury from birth, but eyebrows were erased the minute his head emerged with a set of pointy ears. It seemed odd that, having a human mother and father, that he looked more like an elf. Fortunately for his mother's reputation and any future claims he may have to the family's estate, the court wizard was a renowned expert in the art of magical divinations, and was able to confirm his parentage. Darren was in fact a legitimate heir. The wizard was asked to look no further than that, however, and under strict orders not to find the source of the elven blood, just to perform the magical paternity test. Darren's elven looks still meant he would always be classed as a half-elf by society in general, though this had a tendency to lead to more negative interactions with others than positive living among the nobles of the kingdom. Like all the children of noble houses, Darren's early education was split between academic studies and the study of warfare. Over time, it became apparent that his talents lay more in the military than in scholarly areas. So at the age of 13, he was sent to train at the King's Officer School with the other promising young nobles who demonstrated a high aptitude in military matters from across the land. He studied at the school for the last couple of years, up until 1 week ago, when he and the rest of his class graduated. Most of Darren's classmates were sent off to fight in the mysterious secret war that the king is currently engaged in and obviously overcommitted to. A small number have been left behind to try and address issues at home. With so many military resources being sent away, even the king is forced to admit that things have started to get out of control. Each of the recent graduates assigned these home peacekeeping missions has been seconded to a seasoned field commander who has been sent back from the war to rehabilitate a specific area of the kingdom. Darren had been assigned as an aide to Lord Furion, and loaned a fast horse to get himself post-haste to Springview to meet Lord Furion. his new commanding officer. Yesterday, Darren arrived in Springview and received his briefing. Lord Furion informed him that tomorrow there would be a tournament held in a town. The exact nature of the event was still unknown to him at the time, but he had at least discovered it was to be a team event. Darren's orders were to gift his horse to the local stablemaster, leave town, then arrive slightly late on the day of the tournament with the stragglers, and be assigned to a random team by the local militia captain, who is to run the event in the hopes of recruiting some adventurers for him to work with. Darren spent the night in a small campsite just outside of town, a little off the main road, where he awoke at dawn, catching, roasting, and then eating some small game birds for breakfast. He then proceeded to wait patiently for the foot traffic to slow considerably before re-entering town at the optimal time. Mattis Alberg, also being of noble birth, began his formal education in the standard manner at a very young age, with studies split between academic studies and the study of warfare in order to assess what his aptitudes were. Over time, it became apparent that his talents were not going to be in the military field. The court wizards noticed a strong aptitude for the magic arts and steered his tutelage more towards the study of magic and other related academia. This meant he lived a more luxurious and sheltered lifestyle than many of his peers and developed a gourmet palate, quickly becoming the local expert on fine wines and other important trivia. At some point, the thirst for knowledge began to catch up. Clearly, the only path to finding new wines and dishes and furthering his studies at the same time was to travel to faraway lands in search of adventure. Whilst traveling through some small town or another on the way to meet a wine merchant that had recently been sending some excellent products his way, he noticed many of the common folk had become excited about a tournament in a nearby town called Springview. Perhaps this is where he could find the adventure and excitement he craved, or perhaps just some strong new odors. At any rate, the cheese merchant that Mattis was just talking to said he was taking his wares there for the feast after the tournament. He did seem to make some better-than-average varieties. Mattis reasoned that maybe he could hitch a ride on his cart for a few coins and some well-placed compliments about his produce. The cheese merchant accepted the offer. They had long discussions about cheese and wine pairings on the journey. The pair arrived at Springview well before the crowds got there. Mattis enjoyed his journey there so much, he sweet-talked the town officials into raising the payment to the cheese merchant as the delivery was being made. Mattis went to the tavern to wait for the day's proceedings to start. He intended to see if there was a way he could participate after hearing a few rumors that it was some sort of group event. Perhaps one of the groups would like to have a mage tag along. Elsewhere, a young female half-elf awoke with a start in her quiet campsite. She had overslept after finally managing to get some proper sleep. Her recurring nightmare had seriously messed up her ability to rest at all last night, waking up screaming several times and soaked in sweat. Hurriedly, she straightened up her priestly robes, donned her armor, then put her long red hair into a quick braid before rushing to Springview. She could see other people on the path in the distance ahead, so was sure she could make it in time. Whilst walking at a brisk pace, but not quite running, She reflected on her past. Left on the steps of a church with a substantial coin donation in her crib, she never actually met her parents. Apparently, the union of elf and human was still frowned upon in whatever community it was they lived in, but clearly they had access to some considerable wealth, if the sum in the tale she was told was accurate. The small church she was left at took her in and cared for her, and when old enough, began her early education. This meant having the privilege of learning to read and write, a luxury for anyone not of noble birth. There was one certain priest at the church that was her favorite. Like all the priests, she would address him as father as was expected, but when she said to this man she did not mean it as his title. He was her mentor and surrogate parent. Father would often tell her stories of great adventures he used to have when he was younger, of evil monsters he had slain, and of how he would use the powers of his god to heal those in need. He taught her some basic prayers that could be made to certain gods to gain spell-like abilities for the healing of wounds and other useful effects. He also taught her about combat with weapons acceptable for priests to use, hoping that one day she would take her vows and become a priest. One day, that started out like any other, something happened. A man dressed entirely in black plate armor walked into her church. The man was holding a large blackened sword in one hand. One of the priests stepped up to the man to give him the standard speech about not carrying an unsheathed bladed weapon into the church. He was run through and his limp body thrown aside. Most of the priests on duty just cowered before the imposing figure at this point. In a booming voice, the man demanded his father's murderer come forward as the rest of the cowering priests whimpered, and cowered some more. At this point, her mentor stepped forward to confront the man in the black armor, who simply said, "You are the last." He then took 3 paces forward, smoothly lopped her mentor's head off, pulled something from behind his back that he threw at the floor that caused a large explosion, setting the church on fire and making him vanish at the same time. Most of the priests managed to get out of the church safely, but it quickly burnt to the ground. That same day, she took her vows and started her training to become a fully fledged priest, but also a long-term recurring nightmare. Around a week ago, her basic training was complete. The church dubbed her Sister Silvera and sent her out into the real world. Only a day into her travels, she heard of a proclamation sent out by the small town of Springview about their open invitation to attend their grand tourney. People get injured at events like that, so healing skills could be put to good use. Or maybe there were opportunities to compete in some sort of grand melee and test combat skills. This is how she found herself briskly walking towards Springview. As Sister Silvera approached the town, she began to notice an increased number of travelers sharing the road. By the looks of things, mostly like-minded strangers from many villages near and far, the odd knight with their retinue would gallop past from time to time. There were fields either side of the road. Some of them appeared to have been burnt. After several more hours' travel, she arrived in a smallish town. The square transformed into a hub of excited activity. It was obvious this was the right place. Near the tavern, a small podium had been set up, and an official-looking person was standing there, smiling and waving, apparently making small talk with anyone that walked by for a chat. It was not possible to get any closer. After a short wait, the official-looking guy excused himself from what he was doing and rang a bell to get attention and gestured for quiet. He then proceeded to clear his throat to begin his speech.